It's another week of Pauly versus the internet. I'm back to answer your questions, your tweets, and take on your bad internet takes. Let's get started with Tim at Olmec. Do you think Martial is simply not good enough as main striker? I know he's 24 and I think he could be better with another striker, not on the bench, but next to him. I read some fans were very critical towards him though. I think the jury is still out on Anthony Martial. I think he had a great season last year, but he needs to prove this year that he can do it again. I don't think another striker playing next to him will help him too much. I think he's really good at the role he's being asked to do, which is play this false nine role in the build-up and then get into the box and be your number 9 at the end. Where he struggles is being the number 9 at the end, making those late runs, getting those dirty, grimy goals. We've seen him do it at times, and he's really good at it. He needs to be more consistent. Having another striker playing next to him, I don't think that helps him get there. Oh boy. Next we got at AB Lash, who calls himself the armchair analyst. We're talking about Bruno Fernandes a bit, but he brings something up in the middle of this that is really the focal point. He does come in deep to get the ball and progress it even when playing as a 10. Plus, by this time, it is clear that Fred alone as a defensive midfielder isn't going to work, and McTominay-Fred pivot is much better. Let's stop right there. When have we learned that Fred playing as a lone defensive midfielder isn't going to work? He played there for a few minutes against Arsenal at the beginning of the season with McTominay and Pogba in front of him. He did the same thing against Watford with McTominay and Pogba in front of him. United were on the attack the entire time. He then came in against Copenhagen and Sevilla in the Europa League, and United played some of the best football that they've played, playing alongside Pogba and with Bruno Fernandes in front of him. But more importantly, what we know is that the Fred and McTominay pivot doesn't work. It's boring. They don't progress the ball enough. We've seen this so many times, and post-lockdown, we've seen it a few times, and it's all looked exactly the same. Against Tottenham, against Norwich in the FA Cup, against the Lask, and now in the League Cup against Brighton. There's no creativity in it. Too often, McTominay leaves Fred isolated in the midfield, asking him to do too much. It just doesn't work. And when I pointed that out, the armchair analyst came back and said, Fred alone and McTominay alone isn't much useful. He's talking about, describing the team based on one player. And normally I agree with that. We shouldn't, credit one player and put too much blame on one player. But I will say in this case, when the numbers just keep going down, when we get less shots when McTominay is on the pitch, no matter who else is on the pitch, whether it's Bruno or Pogba or Rashford or Martial, when McTominay comes in, we get less shots than when he's not in. McTominay comes in, we create fewer opportunities. When McTominay comes in, we score fewer goals. When all of that keeps happening with one player, and it doesn't happen with any other combination of players, you kind of have to say, maybe there's something here with this one player. This one comes on a comment from the Red Devils Talk Live podcast on the Elite Football Show Network from Chucky Okasonio. Ollie's dilemma is primarily with the formation, not the personnel. Needs to toss the double pivot for a 4-3-3. We shouldn't be playing with 2 destroyers. I agree. We really shouldn't be playing with any destroyers. To me, a destroyer is someone for a mid-table team, someone that'll come in, play against the top sides, and break up what they are trying to accomplish. The top side shouldn't have them. We have 1, not 2. Pogba's not a destroyer. Matic isn't a destroyer. Fred's not a destroyer. McTominay's the only destroyer that we have. Now, our double pivot isn't exactly a double pivot. We don't play with 2 defensive midfielders. Even in the 4-2-3-1, one of our players plays more as a 6 on the defensive side. The other one plays more as an 8. When Matic is on the pitch, he's the 6. When Fred is with Matic, Fred plays as the 8. When Fred's with McTominay or Pogba, Fred plays as the 6. So you have an 8 who gets up and down the pitch. You have a 6 who stays further back. That's still not good enough for some fans. They want Ollie to go to a 4-3-3. But guess what? He did that against Crystal Palace. That's when he tried it, and it didn't work. Might it work with different personnel? Maybe. But that day, Bruno Fernandes had a terrible game. Paul Pogba had a terrible game. Scott McTominay had a terrible game. McTominay probably not suited to play that defensive role. He didn't progress the ball, and he didn't provide any cover for the defenders. But the 4-3-3, tried it, didn't work. The McTominay-Fred thing, that's the popular one because Well, Solskjaer put them out in the League Cup against Brighton, and it was exactly as predicted. Pretty boring, very uninventive, and I tweeted about this. Got this response from Ricky D at Ricky4XT13. Fred gives the ball away too much to be really nailed on selection, especially in the areas he is meant to occupy. Then Man United Plus chimed in exactly this. His distribution is just awful. Scott isn't a DM, but he does a better job there than Fred, in my opinion. Well, you're right about one thing. Scott is not a defensive midfielder at all. Does he do a better job than Fred? No, we already covered this. Too often when he plays in this pivot, he leaves Fred isolated. We saw it against Brighton. He kept pushing up without the ball, leaving Fred all alone. And Fred's job was clean up the mess. When McTominay gets the ball, he typically plays the safe pass. Fred's the only one looking to progress the ball up the field. That's going to lead to him giving the ball away. And when he's isolated, it's easy for the defense to focus on Fred, which is going to lead to more turnovers. That makes his job of progressing the ball very difficult. I pointed this out, but we'd get Ricky D to continue. Last night, he lost possession 14 times. Last season, of his 1,668 passes, 208 were backwards, versus McTominay, 1,022 and 102. So larger percentage of Fred's passing was backwards. Fact is, neither should be in our starting 11, or our first 11, should say. Now, here's the question. Where are you getting this data from? Because backwards passing, not really publicly available. Also, 1,668, that's the number, according to the Premier League, of total passes Fred made, not completed passes. When it comes to the percentage of how many passes they complete, how many of them are progressive, they're almost identical. They're also almost identical in how many times they pass the ball into the box. But Fred does pass the ball into the final third more often than McTominay does. Another reason why he passes backwards more? Well, a higher percentage of Fred's touches come in the final third than McTominay's do. That means less room to go forwards. And since you're not passing the ball into the box, you kind of have to go backwards. McTominay takes more of his touches in the middle third of the pitch, and yet he's not moving the ball into the final third, and he's not progressing it either. Another big thing, Fred passes the ball about 20 times more per game than McTominay does. That comes because Fred gets about 20 more touches of the ball than McTominay. That's partially because United passed him more, partially because he gets open more and makes himself an outlet. When they do have the ball, they turn the ball over per game at basically the exact same rate. But again, Fred touches the ball 20 times more than McTominay. So per touch, he's turning it over less. McTominay's the one that gives the ball away, not Fred. I presented these numbers to Ricky D. They come from FBref, which gets their numbers from StatsBomb. And I asked him, where is he getting his numbers from? Man United Plus chimed in after that and said, where is any of this data from? And that, my friends, is the internet, where you're just making up numbers and who cares?